Well, thanks a lot, Professor Hanushek, for such an interesting presentation. I think, well, plenty of suggestions for all of us, and of course you were beyond your theoretical time allowance, but it was worthwhile, so we're very happy about it. And, well, now let me just give the floor to you, and so you can make your questions and clarifications or explanations, whatever you want.
Sure.
You show a very interesting correlation between education and economic growth.
Yes.
And you conclude that the causal relationship is if you improve education, you improve the economic growth. But could it also be interpreted the other way around? So the economy improves and perhaps you invest greater resources in education. So how do you know the causal relationship goes that way? Is it because there is a time lag? So you improve in education and years later you see the effect? Or?
Well, that's absolutely the correct question to ask. And people who have done these cross-country growth modeling in economics, it's been very controversial because people ask exactly that same question, and it's hard to know if you have 50 countries, can you really believe that you've got the right thing? Ludger Woosman and I that did the work behind those pictures have spent quite a bit of time now trying to look at different ways to get at causation. So one of them was the picture I showed you that said countries that have improved their test scores seem to have gotten higher growth rates. So that's one, because that's all looking within individual countries. And so it's holding, in some sense, holding everything else constant. We've done a number of other attempts. All of the attempts, I should say, to look at causation can fail for some obvious reason. And I could tell you the obvious reasons why each of them fail. The argument is rather, they all fail for different reasons, and yet we still get the same answers. So it's led us to believe that it's causal. Let me give you one quick example. So one of the arguments is, well, it's all cultural. You know, so what we're really doing is picking out East Asian countries where they work very hard and they have this tradition of doing well on tests, but it's got nothing to do with the schooling. It's that they work very hard and compared to other countries. So one of the things you can do is go to the United States and look at the U.S. labor market. Look at immigrants to the United States, say from Korea. So I look at immigrants to the United States from Korea, and I assign all the immigrants the test score for Korea and say, does that pay off in the United States labor market if they come from a country with higher test scores as opposed to the test score from somebody at the lower end of that PISA distribution? It pays off in the United States to have the Korean schools if you went to school in Korea. But if you immigrated to the United States and were Korean, first generation Korean, with all of the personality characteristics and so forth and family pressure, and I was educated in the United States, there's no payoff to the Korean education. So there's some series of other tests like that that try to eliminate the arguments that you have. I mean, one of the other things we see, for example, I showed you the picture that says that spending is unrelated to these test scores. So if in fact countries grow faster and they have more money because they grow faster and they use that part of that money to buy schools, which you expect them to do, they buy both more cars and more TVs and more schools, it doesn't look like that pays off in terms of achievement. So we've tried to eliminate many of the sort of first kinds of objections to this. But ultimately, if you don't believe our answers, cut them in half. if half of them came from, in fact, reverse causality, the causality going in the other direction, cut them in half. You still get numbers that are out of sight. So instead, the present value of getting to Iceland for Spain might only be $1.5 trillion as opposed to $3 trillion. It's still enough to take the Education Act seriously.
Okay. More questions?
Yes. Hello, thank you very much for that wonderful conference. There are two brief questions that I would like to suggest in here. One is I have seen that most of the effectiveness of a school are put on teachers. Teachers' quality as a secret of success. If I am not wrong, this is much to weight on teachers, whereas education is also made at home, families with higher or lower incomes, because now with the new technologies we can give to different income families lots and lots of information that we didn't have before. The way that we organize the schools, that we treat teachers, and relationship of the students with their duty to study, I think that it's also very important. Teacher is not the only or the key of success. I just believe that there is a link, and there is a very cultural and social link.
So can I answer that, and we'll come to your second question then?
Yeah, the second question is very little. It's just, I'm sorry, I just couldn't arrive on the right time, but I see here lots of course, we are dealing with tests on scores. But what would happen if some schools prepares for scores? I've been in the United States happily, and I've been teaching there, but most of the curriculum was based on pass some kind of scores. I don't know whether this educates or not population. Thank you.
Okay. So let me respond to the first one. Parents are undoubtedly important, and they have a huge impact. And we've talked about that throughout, in that one of the jobs, I think, of schools is to try to sort of cut down on the correlation between parents and kids, and to try to make opportunities for all kids, independent of where their parents were. I phrased it all in terms of teachers for two reasons. One is we now have evidence to suggest that teachers are important enough and powerful enough to overcome backgrounds of kids. And secondly, society is not ready to really intervene very directly in what goes on in the family. At least in the United States, we're not willing to go in and try to change the family. So we're looking at ways outside, and the one institution we have from society to do this is schools. Now, that puts a lot of pressure. I agree with you completely. It puts a huge amount of pressure on teachers, particularly in schools that have concentrated poverty and disadvantaged populations. But we know that it's possible, and what we don't do now, in my opinion, is reward the people who can do it enough. We should be rewarding the people that can do it enough. The problem that we have in the United States, whenever we talk about rewarding teachers for this, is that somebody immediately says, well, you can't reward just those teachers. You've got to reward all teachers the same. And once you do that, then you get no improvement. Essentially, you get the same answer, and that we have to do that. Now, all of a sudden, I've forgotten your second question that was related.
Sorry. The second question is about scores.
Oh, teaching to the test.
Yeah.
This is a real issue. You know that we've had No Child Left Behind and test-based accountability in the United States. One of the ways that people have tried to deal with that is either teaching to the test or, worse, cheating. So we've had situations where the teachers are going in to change the score, the answer sheets for the students. We have a superintendent of schools from Atlanta, Georgia, who is probably going to go to jail because she participated in that.
Oh, excuse me, I never thought about this possibility. It is whether our curriculum should be for education, for understanding the new technologies, etc., or should be score-oriented to feel good somehow.
So I think that it only works if your tests reflect what you want people to know. So if you don't have good tests, you shouldn't do it. On the other hand, I think that we know at 4th grade that we want people to be able to read well and to do simple math problems. And in fact, the tests are just scary in terms of some of the things that we learn that kids don't know or appear not to know. But I think that the test should reflect what we want them to know. I would actually like to have teachers teach to the test. I would like to have tests that are good enough to reflect what we want people to know and have teachers teach to them.
Yeah. More questions?